The 2012 edition of the World of Work report, Better Jobs for a Better Economy, highlights the fact that the current policy approach to the crisis, that is one that is focused on austerity and deregulation, hasn't worked. In fact, the report shows that by nearly all metrics, it has failed miserably. In the first instance, the promise that austerity would bring growth hasn't materialized. In fact, since 2010, 95% of advanced economies have undertaken austerity measures, in some cases quite severe. Most of these cuts have focused on social programs and cuts to public investment, but yet growth remains weak. In fact, in the EU, this is a particular concern where a recession is expected for 2012. In other cases, growth has slowed considerably. In the second instance, the moderate pace of growth that we've seen hasn't been enough to create a sufficient amount of jobs. In fact, we note in the report a current jobs deficit of roughly 50 million compared to pre-crisis level. In the report, we note that in advanced economies, a bulk of the employment growth has been involuntary, part-time, and other forms of non-standard employment, raising concerns about the quality of jobs being created. Also, ironically, the austerity measures that were put in place haven't actually been able to put government balance sheets back on a stable footing. In fact, many countries are still confronted with the challenge of fiscal consolidation. But we note in the report that fiscal consolidation or austerity is not necessarily in competition with employment growth. In fact, we simulate a situation where if we were to change the composition of the fiscal consolidation package more towards supporting employment and supporting public investment, that we would actually get a boost in job creation. Policymakers need to understand that the current approach has been counterproductive by all measures. What we need now is a dramatic shift in the policy agenda, one that recognizes that increased support to employment, job-friendly and social programs can in fact not only boost economic growth, help support those most vulnerable to the crisis, stimulate job creation, but also in fact help support government balance sheets over the medium term.
There is an alternative approach than the current austerity path that many countries, particularly advanced countries, are currently on. And this approach would be a three-pronged approach that we discuss in the report. Three prongs in the sense that, one, there's a movement away from fiscal austerity, while at the same time being fiscally responsible through an increase in public investment and social benefits. The second leg of the approach would be an improvement in the overall business environment. And this would be for small and medium enterprises in particular, who tend to create most of the jobs in economies. And the third leg of the approach would be to strengthen labor market institutions. Because since the crisis, we've actually seen a weakening in labor market institutions in terms of relaxed employment regulations and a weakening of collective bargaining in some sense. So countries that have used this approach, for example, let's take Brazil, which has increased its expenditures on social benefits, increased minimum wages. They have actually seen an improvement in terms of employment and economic growth. It is true that there are a number of countries that actually don't have the money to invest in public infrastructure or public investment. And this can be done, but it has to be a focus on both the expenditure side and the revenue side. In terms of spending, spending can be made more cost effective by investing in such things as telecommunications, which is extremely cost effective while at the same time being labor intensive. The government puts up the initial seed money, and in many cases, the remainder is financed by the private sector. On the revenue side, a number of countries have increased taxes. However, there are alternative methods of improving tax generation without placing an additional burden on workers. Some of this can be done through value-added taxes, which is currently being done in its present form. However, value-added taxes can be adjusted in such a way so that the burden is less on low-income households. And that would be done by eliminated taxes on basic need items. For example, those items that low-income people buy on a regular basis. And public investment is not only cost-effective, but it actually has the effect of stimulating much-needed private investment. Globally, we are currently at a historical low in terms of investment to GDP at about 19.8%. So the public investment is a necessary component in order to crowd in, or as we say, to encourage private investment. And private investment is crucial for employment generation.